All right. Good morning, folks. My sound seems to be really low on mine. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can get to my controls. I cannot. We'll just have to edit this out. Hang on one second, folks. I have to stop sharing and get my audio controls. So if people online do say something, I can actually hear them. Okay, so let's go back to sharing and we will start over here. This will go away. Come on, go away. There we go. All right, good morning. I'm Melissa Schwartz, your managing broker for the Realty One Group Paradise Valley office. And we've got about, I don't know, a dozen people live in this room, and we probably have about 25 or 30 people online. So welcome to our third class. If you have not attended the other two, please go to my YouTube channel. And that way we can make sure that you are up to date. Oh, where'd my mouse go? Come on. You are here for WTF, what's that form? This is on the residential listing contract, which is the exclusive right to sell or rent, and the listing contract addendum. These are the two forms we are going to go over today. These have both been updated. They are not new forms. Just a show of hands in the room. How many of you in the room knew that there was a listing contract addendum form that existed before? Look at that, only a couple of you. Wow. Okay, so we'll show you the revised version, which is new and upbeat, which is pretty cool. There is a lot of helpful stuff, and a reminder, you will get a copy of this video available to you, as well as these helpful information here. Please check your email afterwards. I will send this out. It also will be sent out in your emails on Wednesday. We'll send it out tomorrow, so you'll have that, as well as on Sunday if you are in my PV office. Just a reminder, facts.realtor, specifically the Q&A page, is the best resource for all things related to the NAR settlement and resulting policy changes. How many of you in this room have gone to facts.realtor? The rest of you that have not, I expect before the end of the week, you will go to facts.realtor. If you have a question, I know you love to call me and I would be happy to answer your questions. However, most likely the answers are going to be on facts.realtor. And if I don't know the answer and I can't reach the designated broker, I'm going to go to facts.realtor because that's where all the information is and where your brokers are pulling the information from. We also provided buyer and seller scripts from Forward Coaching. Those are apparently being updated as well. And the links that we have provided before and will be in the stuff that we're sending out to our PV folks will have the latest updates. We're waiting on that right now. There is a copy of a general flow chart of the forms potentially needed in certain situations. Please look at that when Thursday hits and you're like, what do I need to do? What goes first? Which way is up? Well, try the flow chart. Let's look at that first. As the classes conclude, I will upload the recording to my YouTube channel. Actually, Kat will do that. Thank you very much, Kat. Kat will make sure that is on the Realty One Group Paradise Valley /videos on our YouTube channel. So if you have not been there, there are lots and lots of informational videos. You can also view the new and updated sample forms. Currently, if you go to AAR Online, there's a big box in the middle of the screen that says updated forms. Click here. It's really easy to find. And yet I've had people call me and say, I can't find those forms. Like, really? Have you gone to AAR Online? Because I'm almost positive there's a box in the middle of the screen. Oh, okay. So try that. And then you can go to armls.com/settlement for policy and fine information. Why are you going there for the fines? They're trying to scare you. No, ARMLS is the one that is assessing the fines. So please know that there is information about those fines. And when do the fines begin?
August 1st.
August 1st. So hopefully online, everybody heard that, August 1st. All right, this is what those listing broker forms is really cool that they actually have the red line version, articles about the form, and then facts. So depending on what the document is, there may be more or less information, but there's a lot of information on these things, and it's really, really easy to read. They've broken them down. So just know that that information is there, very, very easy to look at. Just to recap, what we will not cover today are your opinions on NAR and or any NAR settlement terms. Your opinions on how the election may affect the NAR settlement terms, especially with all the changes going on. Your creative ideas to circumvent the NAR settlement terms. Really, folks, we do not want to know how you're doing that. We will talk about that a little bit later, but we are not talking about your creative ideas. What California, Washington, or any other state is doing. Scripts for addressing the NAR settlement terms with buyers and sellers. Yeah, because we sent you information on that elsewhere. Scripts for sharing your value proposition with buyers as part of a buyer consultation. What we will cover today is the listing contract, which is the exclusive right to sell or rent, and the listing contract addendum. And I was really thrilled that several of you knew that that listing contract addendum existed before. If you were not aware of that, you really need to learn this form. It is going to be used. If you have a current ER, that is the form you are going to use to modify your existing ER. We will go over that. So please understand that is a really critical document. All right, let's get into this. So actually, whoops, where did my poll time go? I had a poll. Okay, we'll just leave it right there. We're going to go to poll first. Let me go up here and go to polls. So folks online, you'll be able to access this. People here, you get to cheat and see people's responses because they can't see that. Folks online, if you will click onto the poll so you can participate. Question number 1. As of 8/1, sellers will no longer need to pay a buyer broker. Question number 2. If the seller does agree to offer compensation to a buyer broker, that compensation may be referenced in the private remarks of the MLS. You guys in here, you're very funny. You can take a look at that. Number 3. Buyer brokers will need to verify with a listing agent that compensation is offered from the selling listing broker prior to submitting an offer. Number 4, after 9/14, it will be unlawful for listing agreements to last longer than 12 months after the date that the agreement is signed. We'll get into that, folks. And on August 1st, agents will be required to remove buyer broker compensation from all of their listings in the MLS. I have people that have comments here. All right. I will give it we'll give it 2 more minutes. We'll see. I'm going to have a sip of water here and you guys can start working on that. People are avoiding number 2. I don't know what this is. Oh, I'm sorry. They have actually been answering and they have all said false. Okay. I know I didn't see the rest of it. Okay. Do I need to scroll that back down so everybody can see here 3, 4, and 5? We're going to go back over them in just a second. Let's see. Looks like almost everybody's responded online. Yep. Look at that. You guys are so good in being responsive here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I don't know that I should hit end poll. Do I hit end poll? If I share them, well, you can see them there. Let me just go ahead and go over them. So, number one, as of 8/1, sellers will no longer need to pay a buyer broker. That's a sneaky question, isn't it? So sellers have not needed to ever pay a buyer broker, right? So the ARMLS rule that previously required a minimum compensation of $1, that's been gone for quite a while since the initial emergence of these lawsuits. Nothing is changing on that. And I love how the media is like, oh, sellers don't have to offer any compensation. Didn't have to before, folks, right? So the change is in the ER and how the compensation may be presented and where it is being presented, okay? Number two, if the seller does agree to offer compensation to a buyer broker, that compensation may be referenced in the private remarks of the MLS. Look online, 100% on that. In here, everyone is in agreement, I hope. The answer is false. You are not to put it in the MLS in any way, shape, or form. We will address that a little more later, but please, please do not do that. So number three, we have another split answer here. It says buyer brokers will need to verify with the listing agent that compensation is being offered from the selling listing broker prior to submitting an offer. If I could just see hands here, who thinks that's true, raise your hands. And who thinks it's false, raise your hands. Okay, so number three is maybe, so you're all right. Depends on what form you are using, right? Because if you are using the SCA, you do not need to get anything prior, all right? So not necessarily needing the information in advance. If you are using the CAB form, compensation agreement between buyers and brokers, the CAB form, you can attempt to reach the listing agent or listing broker. However, you cannot delay in sending an offer over while you are waiting around, waiting for a response, okay? So overall, the answer is probably false because you do not need to verify as you have other options available to you, okay? So we will go over what the best practices are, but I understand what you're saying there. But again, the key though here is what you cannot do is delay sending an offer over. You can't tell your buyer, hey, I'm waiting to hear back from the listing agent. And then, 3-4 days later, find out that the listing agent got another offer because you didn't bother to send yours. You're the one who's doing the wrong thing there. You need to send that offer over. There are other options available to you. Number 4, after 9/14, it will be unlawful for listing agreements to last longer than 12 months after the date that the agreement is signed. What are the answers here in this room? True or false? I didn't hear that. You've been on vacation, that's fine. So the answer is true. Senate Bill 1218 was enacted in September, specifically against certain agents and brokerages that were making a habit of this. So in trying to protect the consumer after 9/14, this will be unlawful for listing agreements to last longer than 12 months of when they are signed, right? So make sure you're watching those dates. Go to aaronline.com to learn more. And then the last poll question is on 8/1, agents will be required to remove the buyer broker compensation from all of their listings in the MLS. How many people think that that's true here in the room? How many people in here think that it is the agents that are responsible to remove their listing information in this room? True? If they typed it in, yes. False? false. This is really cute, folks. Technically, it is supposed to be where to remove compensation, but ARMLS is not going to rely on you to do this. They are going to remove the entire field and it will be gone on 8/1. They're not waiting around for agents to randomly go in and go, oh, look, I need to remove this. No, they're not doing this. This is a lawsuit settlement, folks. They are removing the entire field. It will disappear. So, all right, let's, I'm going to hit share results. I don't know if they're going to be visible on there or not, but we'll do that. And I will get rid of that. Okay. Is it visible or it's gone?
Yes.
Hopefully online it's gone. If it isn't, please let Kat know and I'll have to. Oh, just exit out of it if you see that. Okay. I have to click on the screen again.
I feel like tomorrow, like nobody's gonna submit any offers or anything like that.
I have people saying they're writing offers today. Yes.
So, ARMLS will remove all the compensation fields.
Yes.
August 1st, but listing agents should be responsible for changing any commentary in the private remarks regarding compensation on that day, right? It's not automatic.
You shouldn't have any commentary about compensation in remarks.
Examples where people have done that and said, we'd like 5% or 4% provided in the offer.
Oh, well, that'll be fun. All right, we will talk about that. And I am hoping all of our Realty One Group agents know, didn't we already cover that in one of the poll questions? And you guys were all 100% on that. Nothing can be in the MLS. Let me repeat that word. Nothing can be in the MLS with regard to compensation.
It'll have to be manual.
Well, they manually added it. So they will manually be fined by ARMLS, and those fines are very expensive. So those fines start at $500 if you've not been following along in our last class. And does anybody remember what they jumped to after the $500? $5,000. So if you've written multiple errors like that in your listings, you could be up to, I don't know, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 very quickly. So I would expect that if any of you have written anything in your listings, you should go back and look at those, because we are not going to review what you already have listed in your stuff. It's already out there. That is up to you. I am really hoping that you know not to do that. So, all right, let's get to the listing contract, okay? So, or specifically the exclusive right to sell and rent. Yes, there is a new EA agreement, but we are focusing on the ER today. If I could get a show of hands in this room, and maybe online, you can show Kat with your thumbs up. How many of you have used an EA form instead of an ER form? Has anyone in this room used an EA? Okay. Well, if you ever want to know about that, go next door to talk to Russell Shaw. That's what he uses. But we are going to cover the ER, which is good because that's what you guys have been using. So we are going to focus on the changes. I am not going to read this agreement in its entirety. I am hoping that all of you have done a listing contract class in the past and gone over the document, and or that you've actually read the document. We're looking at the redlined version, and that's what we're going to go over. So as you can see, we start with the parties and the property. But one of the best changes, we may be able to thank our very own Leah Kramer out of the Goodyear office for one of these additions because she requested it. I'm sure other people did as well. But so it's really confusing when we were talking about broker, because it would say broker, right? And especially if we were talking about two different brokers, the listing broker and the buyer broker, right? So look what they did on line 4. It now says listing broker, right? So how kind was that? Wasn't that nice of them? All right. So many of the changes you will see are simply adding the word listing next to broker. The other word that they changed a lot was changing to buyer instead of purchaser, or changing commissions to compensation. Okay, so that has been one of the nicest things. I have to say thank you to the Forms Committee. I know Jim Sexton and Wendy Shaw in our offices worked tirelessly on these forms, as well as many other agents. I have to say that their effort to be more consistent over all the different forms is greatly appreciated. Because we were changing so many forms, they were able to look at words like commission and change it to compensation on every single form. In the past, they've changed one form, but the next form wasn't changed because they weren't changing anything else. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's move forward here. So here's where it starts getting intense. Not here. This is saying listing, listing, buyer, buyer, listing, compensation. But here's where it gets intense. There's lots of red going on, right? So under the compensation section, I am going to read the full revision so we can try to better understand those changes. And thankfully, I can read them on my screen because the print is too small on what I printed. All right. So compensation. Listing broker compensation is not set by law, nor by any board, association of realtors, multiple listing service, or in any manner other than as fully negotiated between listing broker and owner in this agreement. Should the owner choose to offer compensation to a buyer broker or tenant broker, the offered amount is also fully negotiable and agreed upon after discussion with the listing broker. So, as you can see, there's some specific NAR language that is being used as a result of the settlement, right? You've seen that paragraph over and over, right? So this paragraph is going to satisfy the specific settlement requirements. And as you can see, the previous agreement had a couple of lines regarding, because you can see below, lines 36 and 37 did have the comment that it was negotiable, right? So if you are a Realty One Group agent, you do not need to get a new ER signed after 8/1 because of what was in lines 36 and 37 previously. Those ERs will be grandfathered in. I'm going to share with you a couple of clauses that you might want to put on a listing contract addendum and have signed. It's so cute because it says those are courtesy of notes. Well, they're courtesy of notes actually from one of our agents here, but they referred to them from the attorney, Aaron Green. They're actually from notes on the AAR line fact page that one of our agents sent out and got approved. So one of the important things here is, guess what? There are now initials required here. You need to go over this paragraph with your sellers. So if you aren't talking about things being negotiated, you better be clearly telling them it's negotiable. Right? And now they get to sign off on it. So don't forget those initials, because guess what? Compliance is going to send it back to you and go, this wasn't initial. Please redo that. Okay. So next we will go on to line 40, right? Retainer fees. Some of you do charge this. More power to you. I understand the potential benefit, right? And I have seen several of you in my office charging retainer fees. Then you can ultimately forget about an early termination fee if you have a retainer fee, where you then have to try to pursue somebody to collect those dollars, right? If you get a retainer fee up front, at least it's going to cover your initial costs associated with marketing the home. These are not super common, but they are available to you. Just bear in mind one thing. Retainer fees are payable to Realty One Group. If you're with Realty One Group, they're payable to your broker, right? I don't know if I have anybody from outside Realty One Group here, but just in case, they are payable to your broker, not to you. They have to process and have transaction fees stuff off of those, okay? So let me read this really carefully here. it says check if applicable, retainer. Owner agrees to pay listing broker a non-refundable retainer fee in the amount of dollars. Please note that is dollars. There is no percentage there because we don't know a percentage because we don't have a dollar value for the sale of the property at that point. It is a flat dollar amount. Within 5 days or blank days of execution of this agreement, which is earned when paid for the initial consultation, research, and other services. This fee shall or shall not be credited against the listing broker compensation. So I think most of that's clear cut. I don't know that I would give them 5 days. I would probably take their money upon signing this agreement personally, because most of us start working right away, right? If you're taking a listing agreement, you're hiring the photographer, you're writing your check immediately. So if you're doing a retainer fee, I would be getting that money right there, right? If you're concerned about transaction fees and feel like you need to add something, that is up to you. That is a flat rate amount. You need to determine what that amount is. Maybe it's specifically covering your video tour, your photos, your flyers. Again, all of that is up to you. Okay. Line 42, again, shall or shall not be credited against the listing broker compensation. So when we go down to line 46 on listing broker compensation, so let's say you are charging 8 sausages for your retainer fee and 15 sausages at the end of the day for compensation. You need to decide, am I getting 15 sausages plus the 8 sausages, or am I just getting 15 sausages and you already got 8 of them? That makes sense? Are you going to take it out at the end and credit it against it? That will determine if it's being credited against the total compensation, right? Line 46 is the total compensation. So depending on what box you check up above will make the difference. Okay. So if you are charging a retainer fee, you do need to have one of the boxes checked on line 42. If it is not checked, compliance is going to send it back to you because we have to know what's happening with that money, right? We need to know that because otherwise it won't make any sense. So then we're going to get to listing broker compensation. So see how they changed it from commissions? It says compensation. This is going to exclusively refer to the listing broker, right? It is no longer total commission or total compensation. Please note that that is a huge change on this ER. We've always had one number there and it was inclusive. Now, this is what you're getting paid, period, right? And we'll talk about what can be added to that, but this is your compensation. I'm going to read that here. Well, I'm not going to read that because the same stuff stayed there. The only thing that changed was lister or bringing a buyer instead of purchaser, right? So line 46 gives you that total commission, but it is total for the listing broker. This is the only amount that the listing broker is going to be paid. So really, it probably shouldn't have been sausages on the purchase price. That should have been on the dollar amount. Leah created these slides, thank you, but it is sale. What percentage is your compensation? Or if you're going to do a flat amount, how many sausages do you want there, right? So whatever your full amount of the purchase price or that dollar amount is for you, the listing agent / listing broker. That's what goes on line 46. Line 47 is rare, but it could be used, okay? This is additional listing broker compensation. Maybe for some of you, if you work for a broker who charges an additional processing fee, or maybe a transaction fee to a client that usually that you don't want to pass on to your broker, you cover that, that's fine. Or all of a sudden you decide you're going to pass on something to your client. if you're in essence seeking any additional compensation, maybe you charge extra, forget the retainer fee, maybe you charge extra for the photos. For a video tour, right? Maybe there's something else that you add. Go ahead. Staging, right? Maybe there's an extra fee for staging. That is where that would go, okay? And you would define that on that line. I don't believe that line has either a dollar or percent, so you need to specify what that amount is. Now, new line 48 and 49, unrepresented buyers. Our forms committee debated and they decided, okay, we understand the potential reasonings for it. And we also understand that there is a likelihood of unrepresented buyers entering the marketplace due to the settlement terms. So if you're getting a specific amount here, and then you have an unrepresented buyer, do you add another amount that you're going to be compensated, either percentage or a dollar amount, because you're going to have more work, right? If we have to do the work of 2 agents, but we only represent one party, there's still additional work that comes, and there's definitely additional liability that comes with that. So if we were in a dual agent, which we'll get into, right, limited representation, then we'd be entitled to 2 separate compensations. So this is just an effort to get you as the agent paid a little bit more, or whatever amount more you do enter into a contract where there's an unrepresented buyer. Lastly, I think this is the most critical part of this entire form as far as the changes go, and it's only 2 lines. Buyer, broker. Owner authorizes listing broker to communicate an offer of compensation, a prospective buyer broker, or to a prospective buyer broker in the amount of percentages of the full purchase price or blank dollars, the offer amount, okay? So this is going to get a little muddy in the sense of when do we communicate this offer of compensation? I think you are going to get a lot of different responses. And just out of curiosity in this room, how many of you are watching Facebook with the Arizona Facebook forum, real estate forum? Okay, so those of you not looking at that, just stay sane and don't go there. Please. There are so many different things going on out there. Okay. So as many of you know, Leah Kramer is in our Goodyear office. She created this slide deck. She's given us tons of notes here. She has a lovely shirt that she wears that says WWLD, which is what would Leah do? Should I create a WWMD? Would you like me to do that? So I can create that. But so here is Leah's answer. I'll comment in a minute. But what would Leah do? Kind of answer to this. So if you mark the box and you have a specific amount in there, it can be anything including 0. Okay. I believe you do need to communicate that specific offer amount. So understand the risk of that saying 0 and make sure you are getting clarification from the seller that under all circumstances, they do truly intend to offer no compensation to a buyer broker, right? That's what 0 on these lines means. So I'm sure you're reading between Leah's not so subtle lines. The risk of that is any buyer who is unwilling or unable to pay their own buyer broker, what is a $0 offer of compensation going to do? It is going to remove them as prospective buyers for this home. So don't panic here. I want to be sure that you are talking to the seller and they're aware of that risk and that it is being explained. If you utilize these 2 lines, you have permission to now sign the CAB form, right? Compensation agreement between brokers. Those forms we talked about last week. And again, we have the video on my YouTube channel, right? So this in the next lines we are going to go through is what gives you permission to communicate that specific offer because the seller has already agreed to it. And now you, as the listing agent broker, you can sign the CAB form communicating that offer and agreeing to that offer of compensation. Hang on, just hang on a second. Let me get through this because this is going to be a really interesting twist here, okay? So here's where we're stuck. So what happens in the very likely event that you are talking to your seller and they tell you, well, any offer of compensation is going to depend on the offer, right? So in that case, what do you put on these lines? I want you, if you are not with Realty One Group, please make sure you talk to your brokers, okay, about how they want you to handle this. AAR did a pretty good job of answering this, and then we will share Leah's additional steps. Before I'm getting into this, Leah's comment is she's suggesting to leave these lines blank. She's got that over there. I know we typically do not like blank lines on any sort of contract, right? I know that, Leah knows that, Rog knows that, Ron knows that, right? But if you put something on there, you're now obligated to communicate that. So by leaving it blank, we're going to address it separately in the additional terms of your ER. And folks online, we're going to copy and paste this so you can see it in just a second in the chat. If you want to save it, I'll have it as well. So before I go on to that, one other point. If you do have a specific dollar amount in here or percentage amount, and agents do what Leah is encouraging them to do is basically use the seller compensation addendum, I would still proceed with the SCA. Don't try to counter that out or add a CAB form just to use the SCA because the sellers agreed to pay some amount already. So the form that's incoming from the buyer's agent really doesn't matter. If you want to be super compliant, you get that SCA and anything agreed upon, you could then do a listing contract addendum to modify these lines to spell out that in essence, it's no longer being offered through broker to broker compensation or communicated in that way, in essence, is now being changed to seller compensation directly to the buyer broker. Could you go through all those steps? Yes, right? Leah thinks that's unnecessary and we'll go back to leaving these blank. But the bottom line, if the seller's offered it and they're going to agree to it on the SCA as opposed to a CAB form, everybody's okay. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Okay, so, and I'm going to talk to you about something we've seen already online. Hang on one second. I'm going to get to this next page. So we're going to go to, this is the AAR response. Their answer is, it depends, right? What if the seller does not authorize the listing broker to offer any compensation to a potential buyer broker, but the seller wants to advertise his or her willingness to pay compensation based on the terms of an offer? Does that make sense? Based on the terms of an offer, right? What's the total amount? What is the net going to be to the seller? Right? Think about it, folks. If you've got somebody, let's say the home is listed for 500,000 and a buyer's coming in for an offer of 450, how willing is that seller going to agree to the fact that they've already said they're going to pay some amount and they've got an offer of only 450? Wait a minute. I don't want to pay that at that amount. They're going to end up having to renegotiate anyway because they're not going to pay that compensation. If instead they're looking at the total amount and looking at the compensation with the offer amount and any concessions, they're looking at the total amount. So best practices from AAR. The best practice would be for the listing broker to include the seller's instructions in the additional terms and conditions section, thereby documenting them. Then I'm going to send this to you guys. So you can take the photo if you want. Then if contacted by a buyer's agent inquiring about cooperative compensation, the listing broker should explain in conformance with the seller's instructions that payment of cooperative compensation is dependent on the nature of the offer submitted. So here is what you can write in the additional terms and conditions. Those of you online, this is being copied and put into the chat. Pursuant to lines 50 to 51 of this listing contract, seller understands that in the likely event a request for buyer broker compensation is made, it shall be made by the buyer via the seller compensation addendum, and seller authorizes listing broker to communicate this preferred method to prospective buyer brokers. Seller reserves the right to accept, reject, or counter such requests during offer negotiations. Okay. Hang on a minute. Folks, I'm going to put this in our newsletter tomorrow, so you will have it, so you can copy and paste it. Don't worry if you're in my office. Yeah. Yeah, you can. There are a couple of different things you're going to want to take to use. So Leah's a bit wishy-washy on this, which is not her norm. She's usually very clear on this is the way we're going to do it, and this is the best way to do it. The reason Leah's a bit wishy-washy about this is because it's not necessarily necessary. Ultimately, we don't have to separate out commissions or compensation as an additional negotiable term. We could just get that information up front. We stick to that part very similarly, potentially to price or anything else that we agree to with our seller. And then buyer and seller just engage in negotiations for everything else. Like they can, in essence, negotiate compensation indirectly through price concessions, etc. It's not super hard either way. So lines 50 and 51 are left blank. Oops, let me go back. So lines 50 and 51 are left blank. Additional, hold on a second. Oh, hold on. I missed a page here. So Leah goes on to say, and has said before, she firmly believes, and I also agree with this, that broker to broker compensation will be a thing of the past if the DOG has their way. This could be as early as by December of this year, right? No. Okay, it won't happen that soon. But in the future, any references to broker and broker compensation will just be gone, okay? If that's the case, then there will be nothing on the ER to that effect. There will be no forms to that effect. In other words, the CAB form will disappear. And now everything is singularly being done through the contract. So for that reason, let's go back to Leah's recommendation. You can, on lines 50 to 51 are going to be left blank. We are going to get permission from our seller to convey that the seller is willing to play ball. That's this phrase, right? Or willing to offer compensation, but that compensation will depend on the other terms of the offer. So in the additional terms and conditions, this is the Leah language. I think this is, yeah, pursuant to lines 50 and 51. I already read it, so I got ahead of myself there. And that way, seller reserves the right to accept, reject, or counter such requests during offer negotiations. Is that bottom quote there? So it's the disclosure of what is likely to occur and the authorization to communicate this preferred method to prospective buyer brokers. Those are keys, right? Disclosure, authorization to communicate. Your seller is giving you the right to communicate that, and the disclosure of what's likely to occur in terms of negotiations. I agree with Leah that this is necessary and relevant. Without that authorization from your seller, I don't believe you have permission from your seller to do anything other than share what is on those lines. So if those lines have something else, all you're allowed to do is say that. You can't say, well, it will depend on what the offer is. You know, you ask for what you want to ask for, the seller will respond accordingly, right? All you can do is say, this is what they're offering. So if you don't have a specific dollar amount or percentage on those lines, then what are you sharing? It is in two parts. We're going to go over that in a second. We are going to go to questions. So I'm going to start with people here that have questions.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So, going back to the 12-month maximum, do you need can you do an extension or do you need a new ER?
So very good point. You actually, Oh, the question was, with regard to the new Senate, bill that is changing your listing contracts, that they must be limited to 12 months from the date they were executed. Remember, if you already have one, it doesn't apply, right? It would be to new ones. What I think you have to remove the auto renewals. I think that may be part of, but I will confirm that one. You absolutely are allowed to have someone sign off on a listing contract addendum to extend it. That is not a problem, but the seller must sign off on that, is my understanding. You must get mutual consent that you are extending it. There were some broker.
We did have year-long listings.
No, and that's fine. And you can have a year-long listing, okay?
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, my particular, suggestion, especially because I used to have, I don't know, a half a dozen to a dozen listings at a time. I recommend you end listings on the last day of the month. The reason for that is that means that you will only have a maximum of 12 days each year where you have listings expiring. If you happen to be doing a lot of listings, it is very confusing to know that, oh my gosh, this is expiring. And wait, was it the 12th? Well, maybe it was the 21st. Gosh, I don't remember, right? And you get the alerts, but if you have a lot of listings, you tend to see them and flip them off and not look at them. And if they expire, you have to write a new listing, right? So please be aware of that. So again, my recommendation is to use the last day of the month, which means under this new law, you might only be doing 11 and a half months rather than what I used to do, which would have been 12 and a half months. You won't be able to do that. Okay. Now, just so everybody in Realty One Group knows, Ron Copus, our designated broker, has given the thumbs up on this method of using this pursuant to lines 50 to 51. He's like totally fine with that. Leave it blank, use the language in the additional terms and conditions. Do not use TBD. We don't want any conflicting messages like NA. It becomes dangerous when you put it in a contract, because what exactly are you implying? Better to leave it blank and then address it in additional terms and conditions. Don't leave it blank and not say anything, right? Does that make sense? You need to comment on it, right? So if a seller is, these were questions that Leah got, so I'm going to try and help answer those because I figured they were useful questions and answers for you. Did anybody online have any questions, by the way? They can put them in the chat.
Somebody asked what Senate bill was it?
You might be able to find that on there. Sorry, I think it was on those pages.
We might answer this, but my other question was on line 50 and 51. Now that we've gone over this, I'm probably always gonna advise this too, but let's say if they said, oh, we'll give free bananas, whatever, right? And they wanna put it on there, it says owner authorizes the lister and broker to communicate. It doesn't seem to say it's a must always. So then let's say we get an offer and they're like, fine with 2 bananas based on the SCA, and they're like, we'll take it. I mean, why would I have to go back and say, they said they give 3, you know what I mean?
Well, that's the problem.
Okay, so that's
right? So is the buyer broker, so again, the buyer broker agreement, let's just step back. The buyer broker agreement that you have has an amount. If the seller is offering more than that, who gets that overage? The buyer, not the buyer broker. So I think that if you explain that to your sellers, how likely are your sellers going to want to maybe offer that? Right? So that may change what the sellers are willing to offer up front. And I think that's why you're going to see oftentimes this is going to be blank, and let your buyer ask for the compensation they need. Okay. So here's the question. If a seller isn't offering buyer broker compensation, do we refuse to take the listing? So this is your choice, right? And you're exactly right. Melissa Gasper said it depends on how you run your business. So this is in Leah's opinion. So in her opinion, the offer of a buyer broker compensation is something that helps put the deal together. And I absolutely agree with that. There's a lot of commentary out there that broker fees are going to disappear. I don't know how they all of a sudden think we're going to work for nothing. They obviously don't know our expenses, but I think the important thing for a listing broker is to make sure that you're educating your seller. If they tell you they will absolutely won't pay a buyer broker compensation, is that out of principle or ignorance? Okay. And somebody said it's a PITA, which stands for pain in the ass. So that's fine. But here's the thing. Then the question to them is, so wait a minute, if we get an offer of $10,000 over list price and they ask for buyer broker compensation of that amount, you would reject it? Right? And if they say yes, then they truly do not want to pay a buyer broker compensation, then I may elect not to work with them. Right? You can, oh, absolutely. That's your business. You never have to take a listing contract. Right? That is absolutely your business. Okay. So the CAB form, somebody asked, may it be loaded into the MLS? No, right? It may not be loaded into the MLS. Again, nothing with reference to compensation may be uploaded to the MLS. Concessions can go in the MLS, at least for now. That may be regulated or removed in the future, but as it stands now, you may offer concessions, but they cannot spell out in any reference to compensation. Okay, please make sure you understand that. Yes.
So one more, just maybe this is a comment, but the CAP form hopefully is going away or not going to be used anyway. But it doesn't even make sense with this ER because there wouldn't be commission between brokers since it's separated now. The seller paying buyer broker, seller broker. So unless you put 6 sausages on line 46, then you're not, then the CAP wouldn't come. You know what I'm saying?
That is not correct because there is a line 50 and 51 that says buyer broker. And that's
what the sellers.
that is what this, no, but it's through the listing broker.
Oh.
It's through the listing broker, but you don't get to keep it. It's only if there's a buyer broker involved.
I think it goes over unrepresented buyer, but we're gonna get to the dual agency part too.
Well, the dual agency, yes, we will talk about it more, but buyer broker, if you are also representing the buyer, then you get the buyer broker, right? And you also then have to have an agreement as the buyer broker to get paid. Remember, because if you are going to be representing a buyer, in order to get paid, you must have a buyer broker agreement. All right. So.
Show your own listing.
Correct, correct. But then the question is, are they gonna be unrepresented or not? So that's why no, you don't have to do it to show your listing, nor does a member of your team. See, that's the other thing. You have people with teams. You may send over somebody on your team to show that property because you are the listing agent, and that person may end up becoming the buyer broker. They would then get that buyer broker compensation, but would need to do a buyer broker agreement before writing that offer, right?
And I like that they put the unrepresented thing in there to show, that we do extra work. I just don't understand. I just don't think from a seller's perspective, they're gonna go, wait, they're unrepresented though. What are you doing for them? You know, when adding extra, so.
Oh, you're doing the work for the seller.
Right,
You are working, you are doing double the work for the seller because you are having to make sure that the seller is being represented. For instance, if the buyer writes something on a napkin, you know, well, you don't have to rewrite it, you know, but your seller has to determine if that's truly what they want to do. And the buyer's not doing cash. Their lender may have another thing to say, right? But there is a lot more work for an unrepresented buyer. If you were not in the classes earlier, please go watch that video because it is very intense what you have to do in that scenario. All right, let's get to line 52, unless were there any questions online? Okay. Line 52. Owner's authorization includes consent for the listing broker to enter into an agreement with a prospective buyer broker to compensate the broker if they represent the buyer of the premises. So this is the CAB form, right? Seller just gave us the permission to enter into an agreement with the buyer broker. In such circumstances, owner shall provide listing broker the funds necessary to pay the agreed upon buyer broker compensation not to exceed the offer amount. Again, this is, this is the amount on line 50 to 51, okay? Owner also shall pay listing broker the offer amount as additional compensation if any agent of the listing broker represents the buyer of the premises. I know this sounds confusing, but realistically, this is making sure that it's not just limited to the listing agent. If someone else comes from Realty One Group, right, from your brokerage here, they would still be entitled to the same amount of compensation as any other buyer broker, right? We are distinguishing that to make sure they're compensated. This is not to limit the amount of the listing broker compensation on line 46, because there is a person from the listing broker also bringing a buyer to the table. They're making sure you're getting both of those, right? Listing broker, buying broker. Okay?
Calling it an offer amount on this page?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Offer amount sounds like the offer that you're getting from a buyer, so.
No, it's not that. Okay, so lines 56 through 58. Owner acknowledges that buyer broker represents the interests of the buyer and not the interests of the owner in a transaction unless the agent of listing broker represents both owner and buyer under limited representation dual agency as described in section 6. Owner also acknowledges that buyer broker may credit part or all of their compensation to the buyer. Right? So in reference to your question earlier, this is where we make sure that the owner or seller understands that there may be limited representation or dual agency, right? You could do both, okay? So remember on those buyer broker forms, if there's an overpayment of compensation, meaning that what the buyer broker is receiving from the seller or listing broker, if that exceeds the amount on the buyer broker agreement, then the excess goes as a credit to their buyer. That's what that last line, that the buyer broker may credit part or all of their compensation to the buyer. So the seller may see it split up that way on the settlement statement. We're making sure they understand that from the beginning, because you can imagine the seller at the end going, what do you mean I'm giving blah, blah, blah to the buyer, right? It's like, well, remember, you offered this, the agent could only accept this. Any overage is offered to the buyer. I honestly would be reading these sentences with my sellers to make sure they're seeing this, saying, look, I understand there are changes here. I want you to make sure you understand how this processes, okay? And we want to make sure, of course, they aren't surprised at the settlement. Yes.
So if I'm a dual agent.
Yes.
To, with the contract, if I want to get paid, submit an SCA.
Mhm.
If there's 0 on them.
How are you gonna know there's 0 on that,
Because
Well, you're the
I'm
listing
dual
agent. She's the listing agent.
I see.
No, it's weird, but.
That is a great question, and I may have to get back to that.
It depends if the buyer's paying it, right?
If it's an unrepresented buyer, no, but if you are a dual agent or a limited if you're actually doing both sides, I believe you do have to have the SCA, because otherwise you don't have compensation.
Right.
Correct. Okay. Well, not the SCA, you need the buyer broker agreement. You can submit the SCA with your offer, that's fine, but you also need a buyer broker agreement. Because that buyer broker agreement is what is saying the amount of compensation that you are allowed to be paid. There are some other questions later that I'll throw in there that were very funny earlier that I think you guys will be amused. So,
Do you have a buyer broker agreement and the buyer's fine to pay it all? You don't need an SCA, am I wrong about that?
you would need the CAD.
Why?
They're paying the whole thing.
If the buyer is willing to pay it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Oh,
if you're a buyer, so you have a buyer and they're saying, you know what, I'm paying your compensation, I don't care what the seller's offering.
Yeah.
None of this applies.
Deal for-
Yep,
Or just put it in the concessions and I'll take care of the rest. You don't need an SCA or a cap if your buyer is paying for it.
correct. I don't mix concessions in here now. Just,
Yeah.
you don't need anything. If your buyer is paying you, you've signed your buyer broker agreement, they're like, fine, not a problem. I'm gonna write that check. I'm good. And we're actually not gonna go over the rental section. It's identical to the sales, by the way, but nobody's talked about how do we think this is really gonna play out? The language is the same. I am not sure how this is gonna play out. I actually am gonna guess that some of you doing larger end rentals are gonna start taking kind of an upfront fee from buyers, a retainer fee on your buyer broker agreements for tenants. So that you're not getting in the car and driving around for the next 3 weeks and not getting paid anything. So I'm expecting that I'll see some of that, but we're not gonna go over that. Again, literally the words are the same. It's just regarding tenant broker and the tenants. Okay, so a whole bunch of listing and compensation and listing, yeah, listing, compensation, other, listing, compensation, listing, right? A whole bunch of this, right? It's page by page by page, compensation, listing, compensation. All right, so, and look, nothing changed. Oh my gosh. How do we have nothing changed here? So that's kind of cool. Yeah, nothing changed there. So, let's see where we are. We're gonna keep doing this. Look, more listing, dual agency, listing. It's all over the place, right? Let's get all the way down to more listings. All right, 270. This is a whole new section. But guess what? Well, not entirely, because it was reflected on our buyer broker agreements, as you might recall. This is a courtesy of the attorneys that want to attempt to prevent class action lawsuits. So the parties agree that any and all disputes or claims will be brought in the party's individual capacity and not as a plaintiff or class member in any purported class, collective, representative, or consolidated proceeding. The parties hereby waive their right to commence, become a party to, or remain a participant in any group, representative class, collective, or hybrid class collective action in any proceeding, and the arbiter shall not preside over any form of a group, representative, or class collective proceeding. Yeah, it's courtesy of the attorneys, right? They want to attempt to prevent another class action lawsuit in the future. Yeah, that's cute. So I'm not sure that'll work, but they're gonna try. Yeah, it's a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, but in essence, they're saying, hey, seller, you're not going to participate in these class action lawsuits that we are seeing. Can we actually regulate or control that? Probably not, but it does help if we have a written agreement showing such. So we have it in there. And guess what? What do you need here? Initials, yes.
Yeah.
And if they refuse, guess what? Then you probably are not able to sign a listing contract with them. So, if, you're gonna have to, I would have to check with Ron, but my guess is he's gonna say, no, they need to sign that. So, but everyone's also gonna be saying the same thing. So unless they're planning on doing for sale by owner, I don't know any brokerage that is not gonna require that line to be initial.
Okay, and I saw the new verbiage coming red.
Well, you can print out the red line version. You have it. You can take it with you so you can show it. So, all right, here we are, additional terms and conditions section. So that clause we referenced earlier would go here. So seller, this is the conversation, right? Seller, if you are willing to pay something, but that something is an undetermined amount until we see the totality of the terms of the offer, that clause would go here in additional terms and conditions. You may also have other clauses that go into this section. There are several that I've used in the past. If you offer variable commissions, and yes, that is allowed on the listing side, not buyer side. So I have seen if the property sells between this and this is the compensation. If it sells between this and this is the compensation. Trust me, on our higher end properties, I could have a whole slew of those, variable commissions. There are all sorts of other clauses that I've seen on there. So if you have other ones that you're concerned about, obviously speak with your broker. Then we go to, again, listing. Whoops. All right, so, Leah's sign off on the agreement was easy peasy, right? Not so sure is what you are all thinking right now, but time will tell. I'm looking at your scared faces. This is from some of the stuff online Leah picked up. There are wild pictures on ways to communicate that there is buyer broker compensation if applicable. If you are using the SCA as the buyer broker and you are submitting those with your offer, none of this matters, right? It does not matter at all, right? If you are the listing agent and you leave 50 and 51 blank, and then you're just communicating with prospective buyer brokers, hey, whatever you believe you're entitled to or whatever you've agreed to on your buyer broker, then submit on the SCA. If you do that, none of this applies, right? So some mastermind group, courtesy of Tracy Levy, showed this. If you have anything written on 50 and 51, you need to communicate that buyer broker compensation, right? That's your job as a listing broker. So people have asked, can you put a sign up? Yes, you can. You can put a sign writer out there. One of them says courtesy to buyer brokers, I think is what that top one. The other one, if you can't read that, says, howdy buyers, gladly paying agents to manage your side of the fence. Awesome. But you can do that. Now, I love this. It says autoresponders to text. How many of you know you can put autoresponders on text, or you can save a shortcut, right? If you've got one listing and you want to have that saved as a shortcut, save it as a shortcut, and you can type 2 letters and send it out. It'll pop up, right? Your voicemail, you can put it on your voicemail. Yes, we're offering ... on 123 East Main Street. Now, if you have 50 or 60 listings, I'm not sure that's really the way you want to go with that, right? I'm not sure you want to say, yes, on 123 East Main Street, it's this, and on 456 West, Tatum, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's going to be an awful lot to try to do, right? So you can display it on your website. There are limitations that we talked about them the other day. Sign writers. Oh, look, offering buyer broker compensation tattoos at your open houses. You could do that. Skywriting with drones. Look, you get the point. You can go and do all sorts of funky things, right? And the very last one, and there were like 50 of these, but the last one Leah put up here, a phone call. Pick up your phone, right? Listing brokers, if you are going to offer something on 50 and 51 through your sellers, you better have your phone and you better be answering it. Please answer your phones, right? Exactly. All right. So let's see. Yes. Go ahead.
So, if we're writing an offer today or tomorrow, and the, compensation is in armless, I think if I was writing an offer, I would want to put like something something on the offer in the additional terms, like for disclosure purposes only X? Because what happens, where's your?
You cannot write, your coverage is, print out that MLS, print your sheet out. Print your sheet out so you have it. Please print your sheet out. But, if you wrote an offer and it gets accepted today, today's Tuesday, or it gets accepted tomorrow, it is covered under the current conditions. If you are writing something tomorrow, I would wait till Thursday.
That's what I just said.
If you're writing an offer tomorrow and it's not gonna be accepted till Thursday, I would wait till you have the new forms.
Yeah, well, there's gonna be some weird things too, where they're gonna counter on the first, you know? So, that's why I feel like it's kind of wait a day, probably.
I went under contract this morning, so I'm like, whew, okay, done.
Trying to get an offer tonight, but it can go 2 days, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, but like you said, print it out, then we have that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think at that point, give me a call. We may have to talk to Ron about doing an addendum that references back at that point that this offer was generated on, it's gonna show that it was generated before. So, everybody knows that that's occurring. I did have somebody tell me, and I wanted to bring this up. I had an agent tell me that EXP has apparently stated that they will not be doing any broker to broker compensation. So that's fine. If you see an EXP listing, you'll know up front. Don't bother to call because there is none. And there's no cab form. They're not allowing a cab form.
Is that-
Just use the STA.
Is that confirmed, or like, just my answer broker, I can call.
Give her a call, text her and verify that. It's an Instagram post from
If someone has a closing on August 1, they don't need to.
So if you are currently under contract, you do not need to make any changes with anything. The only time that would be not the case is if your contract falls out, okay? If it falls out, then you would need immediately a buyer broker agreement to write another contract. Okay, any other questions there? How are we doing on time? Oh, good, look at that. Oh, it wasn't really a question. We were talking about, yes, I will. The comment was whether or not my information on EXP was actually from EXP, and I did not have an answer to that. So, we're verifying that. So, here are some clauses that were actually created. They were actually created by somebody in our office that I forwarded on. They're being referenced to Aaron, the attorney with AAR, that I'm not sure he's actually seen them, but it's okay. Thanks, Aaron. But Ron has approved them. So if you have a current ER and you again, it is going to be grandfathered in our company. If you're not with Realty One Group, check with your broker. Our ERs will be grandfathered in because there were 2 lines in the previous ER that actually said that it was negotiable, and so we're allowing that to be grandfathered forward. However, if you want to explain to your sellers what's going on so that they have a heads up when they get an offer, if you're not under contract, you might want to do this, right? Owner understands that ARMLS is removing cooperative compensation from ARMLS starting August 1st, 2024. Second bullet, right? Owner requests that buyer negotiate any concession and or compensation with their offer. Owner agrees to pay listing broker an additional compensation of blank of the purchase price if the buyer of the premises is not represented by a buyer broker. You could change that if they're an unrepresented buyer if you wanted to, but remember in the current contract, you have an umbrella amount that is still valid, right? So if your contract says, 6 sausages, that is being paid to this brokerage, right? How you divvy that up is going to be up to you. So, with broker approval, this would go on a listing contract addendum. The reason it says with broker approval is if some of you are not with Realty One Group. So again, the ER can stand. The buyer broker, if you have, how many of you have existing buyer brokers in this room that are in place right now? You understand that your job on Thursday morning is to send out new buyer brokers to your buyers to get them newly executed. You must sign a new buyer broker. And don't worry, we're going to give you this language so you can take the photos, but we will make sure that these clips are out there. Rentals. Same thing, listing agreements stand. Buyer broker agreements, if you have a buyer broker agreement with a tenant, they must be updated, but your listing agreements are fine. You can add this language if you want to. Okay? So that they understand. Okay. Questions? Online? Mm-mm. So here's a question that was asked to Leah. Does Realty One Group have plans to display on the corporate website compensation? So there are other considerations in play. Are they looking at doing concessions for carpet? Wink, wink. There's a lot of discussions on attorneys watching this and wanting to pounce on agents trying to circumvent the MLS rules. We've heard of new websites popping up. Oh, you know what? I flipped pages here. That was not to the do this. Okay. Sorry. On our website, there are other considerations at play. Yes, our web designers are looking at it, but there's some reservations here. If the DOJ gets rid of this, why are we going through all this process to create this extra spot, which is then going to have to disappear? So they're kind of playing that by ear right now. I don't expect it to be immediate. So remember, folks, you can use the SCA and none of this impacts you. None of it. All right. We're giving you an opportunity to learn multiple options. I get that. We still encourage the use of the SCA instead. Is it possible? Here was a question. Is it possible to end up obligating the seller to a double co-broke compensation? The answer to that should be no, because the CAB form is the CAB form. If you do the SCA and the CAB form on the SCA, it references the CAB form. There's a line you fill in that says there's a CAB form. Right? If you don't fill that in, you could potentially have a problem. Websites. We talked about 2 clicks. This is just kind of a commentary. The point is that if you share on the MLS your website, if they click on your website and the first thing on your website says, I offer blah, blah, blah on all my listings, you will be fined. No ifs, ands, or buts. Okay, so if you don't put in the MLS, then that's fine. You can have that out there, but be really careful what you're sharing on the MLS. All right. So Brian actually commented that there are 2 big landmines. Can't give anyone a good reason to advertise seller concessions in the MLS, because masking them for $10,000 in concessions for carpet, wink, wink, there are going to be people that are literally going to be looking at what comments are on the MLS that are waiting to pounce on agents that are making violations, okay? We're hearing about, there are these new websites. Did you hear about a new website? You can offer your broker compensation on this new website that's going to circumvent the whole MLS. Please, please, if you are with our company, please do not fall for this. You already know what the settlement rules are. Somebody else offering that up, they're violating the settlement rules. And who's going to be hit? Them? No, you. So please don't go out there and post something anywhere that you are not in direct control of. Because guess what? If you post it out there and they continue to post and post and post, you're going to be liable for it because you gave them permission to have that data. Put it on your website if you want to, that's fine. Communicate it how you want, but please don't put it anywhere where somebody else is able to send that information out and possibly get you in trouble. We cannot aggregate commissions. We are all subject to the same responsibilities and guidelines and the restrictions of the settlement, right? You as Realtor members, ARMLS subscribers, anyone under our brokerages under the settlements. So please do not fall for some third-party website that is claiming that you can share your commissions here. It's all fine. No, it's not. You will be the one in violation of the settlement. Seller, let's see, seller compensation addendum. Please confirm how we confirm the existing listings based on your broker, right? Are you okay with your current ER? We covered this for Realty One Group. If you're not with Realty One Group, please check with your broker, see if they're okay with those clauses or if they're allowing you to keep it or if you're having to redo it, okay? Questions online?
Someone did ask, can you post on e-flyers sent by e-flyer companies, I'm assuming.
You can send stuff on e-flyers, but what can it not have on it? Nothing about compensation, because usually it's your MLS feed that goes into those e-flyers. I guess you could design your own. So then yes, you could. It's just a flyer, so that's fine. It's not being reproduced anywhere else. If you're the listing agent, you could probably do that on only your listings, not anybody else's listings. I still would be very, very careful with that. 2 more questions here. Yes.
This is probably not a good question, but let's say my people decide not to fill in lines 50, 51. Somebody calls me and says, are you people offering any kind of compensation to listing broker? Do I read this to them?
Okay, so the question, just so for folks online, is if lines 50 and 51 are left blank and they've added in the additional terms and conditions those instructions, you're going to follow those instructions, which state, hold on, if I can find that easily.
I can't give a specific amount. I'm just gonna say exactly what those words
It's understands that in the likely event a request for buyer broker compensation is made by the buyer via the seller compensation addendum, seller authorizes listing broker to communicate this preferred method, i.e. the seller compensation addendum, and that the seller reserves the right to accept, reject, or counter off such responses during offer negotiations.
Exactly, thank you.
Yes. You're going to basically shorten, you don't have to say all of those words, right? But you're going to shorten that the seller is agreeable to offering compensation depending on the offer, the total amount of offer. And we recommend you use the SCA. That is what you're going to say.
Thank you.
Was that your same question? No?
No, but I was just gonna say, that it was false, they're just not accepting the cap, they're just not doing any. EXP.
Then it's true, because that's what I said, is that they've said they're not doing in broker to broker compensation, the cap form.
Oh, okay, I thought you said don't even worry about calling them to see what they're offering. 'Cause they are
Correct.
offering the only on the SCA.
But then they don't communicate it. Okay, so the question was, is EXP, so EXP is not allowing broker to broker compensation. They are not using the CAB form. That is a true statement. That is a true statement. You may use the SCA form. They are willing, I guess some of their sellers are willing to offer compensation is what you're saying. You could call to try and find out, but ultimately if you don't reach anybody, just use the SCA and ask for what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right.
The sellers. It's not even a form.
Right, so they are not using the broker to broker compensation form. No CAB form if you're working with EXP. Well, you're not going to get it if they're the buyer broker. If they're the listing broker, just go to your SCA. Makes it easy. All right, any other questions online right now? No. All right, we are going to get to the listing contract addendum. I've answered, I spent a lot of time on that. So, Okay, this is actually short and sweet and very simple. And by the way, it's already in existence. You have 2 more days of the old version, but this is a much more robust version. General information is at the top, and then it's broken into what are likely modifications to a listing agreement. Let me see if we don't have them broken down. So, broker compensation. Any changes to broker compensation to the listing side, unrepresented buyer, variable commission buyer, broker, you get to define those right there. Then you do have a sold change form you can still use that changes the expiration dates, but you can now use this listing contract addendum, especially if you're doing multiple changes, right? So this is Leah's comment, and I found this fascinating. She would never cancel a listing because your after expiration clause, which is in the listing agreement, is not effective if you cancel,
Yeah.
right? So only after expiration. So if you're going to end your listing early, just move the date up, because then your after expiration would apply. If somebody has gone through the property last week with you, and then they go around you and try to do that, then your after expiration language applies unless they do a listing with somebody else, right? So little layer of protection. So a modifier for any changes on the ER or additional terms. And then again, the cancellation section, owner and broker agree to mutually terminate the listing contract effective immediately. Neither party shall have any further rights, duties, or obligations under the listing contract, and mutually release each other from all liabilities, claims, and causes of action related to the listing contract. Or, right, where'd I go here? 22, oops. Or, owner and broker agree to mutually terminate the listing contract effective immediately upon the following terms and conditions. So that could potentially be an early termination fee, right? So this is where that retainer fee might be the smarter way to go. Collecting an early termination fee can be somewhat challenging, but at the end of the day, you can keep the listing. You might have to put it temporarily off market, TOM status, but you keep the listing until it's paid, or you don't have to cancel it, right? So it's sitting out there. They can't sell because you have the contract on it, okay? Your ER, well, all contracts that we have are mutual obligations. They are mutually binding. They are bilateral, which means one party cannot just cancel on the other one, with one exception on the ER. So for those of you that are aware, there is a clause in there that allows the listing broker, with cause and a potential fair housing violation, or statements from the seller that would be a violation, which would be such cause to cancel unilaterally for their listing agreement. Most agreements are bilateral, and so they would require mutual cancellation. So Leah's very funny. I guess she's had some bad experiences, and in all those cases, the clients happen to have been named Bob. Sorry if anybody on here is a Bob, but she just says, you know, there are times in those cases that she would gladly mutually cancel because she just wanted to be done with the listing and with Bob. So you may have that client, and it may be worth it to walk away without reimbursement from your photos or anything else and just mutually cancel that. That's fine. It says further on, upon the fulfillment of the above terms and conditions, neither party shall have any further rights, duties, or obligations under the listing contract, and mutually release each other from liabilities, claims, or causes of action related to the listing contract. That is under the legal, the cancellation. That's more legal mumbo jumbo to show that you are going to be done with each other. Okay. Sold change form could be better if you're just going to TOM, right? If you're just doing a little change, that sold change form hasn't gone away. You're in the MLS, want to make one modification, you can use that. Multiple ones or more descriptive things, this listing contract addendum is awesome. It's a very cool form. If you've taken a listing and it hasn't gone on the MLS yet, and you're modifying the price or terms, use this because it isn't actually on the MLS. So your sold change form, you're not filling in all the MLS info, and it hasn't changed because you haven't put it on the MLS yet. So this is a better form in that case. All right, I have a slew of additional questions here, but I'll ask here if anybody has any. Well, let me just go to this real quick. This is that what would Leah do? Use the agreement to show property, at least initially, she's saying. I would go on to say, those of you that are comfortable with the exclusive buyer broker agreement, keep using it. Slightly different form, but start using it. There is no reason not to use that. I understand why she's saying use the agreement to show property. If you're just going out for one quick thing, don't try to get people to sign an exclusive agreement. They don't want to get married to you after knowing you for 5 minutes. Use the other one, prove your value, set up that buyer broker presentation, okay? Then use the seller compensation addendum with all offers. The listing agent, leave lines 50 and 51 of the ER blank and get permission from the seller to communicate to buyer's agents that they should submit the SCA with their offers. Oh, hold on. Are there questions there? Okay, we got some questions online. I'll take them. I do have some other ones, and then we'll wrap this up. I can't even tell what time it is. Thank you. Okay.
If you have a current buyer that's not under contract, you will need a new buyer broker. If the buyer is under contract, the buyer does not need to sign a new.
Okay, so again, if you have a current buyer under contract, you are protected by the current contract. If that contract falls out, then you must get a buyer broker agreement with that buyer to show any more property or write any offers. If you have a buyer broker agreement and you are not under contract, you must issue a new buyer broker agreement and hopefully get it signed, right? Hopefully get that signed on Thursday. Otherwise, you do not have representation and you cannot show a home. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, so we have other questions here. So if you run into a situation with an ER where you're needing to cancel and this because the seller is being uncooperative or making threats, verbal abuse, etc., talk to your broker so we can assist you with that. This is a good one. If the agent is married to the buyer, do you need a buyer broker agreement? We'll look at you all like, whoa. If the buyer is married to the agent, do you need a buyer broker agreement? Yes, in fact, I would go so far if you are the buyer and you are the agent, you still need a buyer broker agreement with yourself because otherwise you don't get paid. A buyer broker agreement is required to show property. There are no distinctions in these forms. Check with your broker, but for now, we're going to say you need a buyer broker agreement even for yourself. Another question came in. Can we put in the MLS that the SCA should be included with the offer? But not sure AMRS will agree. I would say, I know that it's not compensation, but please don't put anything like that in the MLS. Do not put any compensation in the aligned system either. Right? Somebody's showing your property and they're using the lockbox timing and you have a response on your aligned system. Hey, thanks for showing, we're offering ... Please do not do that. That will be a violation. ARMLS, I believe, owns the aligned system and therefore under the settlement, they cannot do that. Concessions, please do update with what is conveyed with contracts. All right. So, that could be interesting. So remember, concessions may have limitations depending on your buyer's loan product and the amount they're putting down. So be careful of that. All right. EA is the same as an ER, but allows the seller to sell their own home, sell their home to somebody they brought in and not pay their agent, if you didn't know that earlier. Somebody asked, is clear cooperation going away? It is actually under discussion with NAR, but we don't have anything more of that. This is funny. It's, can we show an off-market property without any agreement signed? What do you think the answer to that is, folks?
No.
No. You are obligated to participate with these new agreement forms. Where you find the listing is not relevant to the settlement. You have to have an agreement prior to showing any home, even if that showing is a video tour, okay? There are some brokers that are saying you can't even sign people up for searches. Realty One Group is not in agreement with that. We believe you can sign people up for searches and let them do searching online, because they can do virtual tours. They can see photos of properties through other websites. So we don't feel that that is required. There are some brokerages out there that are saying that. But in order to go look at a property for somebody, you must have a buyer broker agreement. How soon do you have to log that buyer broker agreement
72
into SkySlope? 72 hours. There should be new fields up either tomorrow or Thursday that allow you to input a buyer broker agreement without a property address. And I believe that will be how you will start with a buyer broker agreement. When you get the contract, it will switch over to an address. Okay, so I believe you have to go into that buyer broker agreement and say, accept a contract, and it will move over. I have not seen that though, so hopefully I'm correct in that. Buyer broker agreements in existence, again, must be redone on 8/1. How many of you have appointments on your calendar to meet your computer at midnight or at 9 in the morning? I don't care which, to send out your buyer broker agreements. I'm not sure they will actually be out there. Look, all forms are being released on August 1st in SkySlope Forms and Transaction Desk. This is the first time they have ever put 18 forms are changing, 18. So, yeah, the possibility that it might crash is probably not far-fetched. At the very least, I would think it is going to be a very sluggish system. For those of you that are up late, I would actually recommend at midnight, if they are available, to go in and do at least your buyer broker agreements. Again, if you are under contract now on anything, as long as it closes, you are fine. Facts.realtor page has some facts on consumer requirements.
I got one more.
One more question online, we'll take it.
Please repeat which form we use to update the current listing agreement that is not on MLS.
If you want to modify a current listing agreement, there is currently a listing contract addendum in your forms. People just did not know it was there. So you are welcome to go use it. Does not have all the fun things that were redlined. It just is open for you to write the information you need on there that you're modifying. Anything else? I see a lot of eyes going, oh my gosh. Okay, so Leah had a different picture here. I couldn't put it on here. I'll go to AA Milne with a little Winnie the Pooh. I am not lost, for I know where I am, but however, where I am may be lost. So, you know, we are all in this together. I took Leah's picture off there. So you can go look at her video and find her last picture. So she had the warning up front on hers for her language. So, but I do think Winnie the Pooh applies here, because I do know many of you feel lost. I think we will have a better understanding once this rolls out. I think the hardest thing, as some of you mentioned, whoo, lights went on. The hardest thing that some of you mentioned is what to do in the next 48 hours, right? So you're trying to submit an offer. You're trying to submit an offer tomorrow, and will it be returned tomorrow? Or are you going to roll with a counter offer to the next day, and then what happens? So I think I will check with Ron on that. I think probably I would be in conversation with that agent to find out if they're not going to respond in a timely manner, or if they're gonna go into a counteroffer situation to try and get it wrapped up tomorrow. And if it's being pushed out, then you guys need to redraw the documents, so. Okay. Any other questions? Anything online?
Nope.
Thumbs up, awesome, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and we will get this recording and these tools put together for you so you can access them on our YouTube channel.